So Jesus gives us a simple statement. Whoever keeps my word will never see death. It sounds like it should be a simple statement, but clearly the Jews were misunderstanding this. They were trying to put it in context of their typical ways of understanding things. So they tried to attack it from a literal interpretation, which naturally would be problematic. So I kind of see in the Jewish behavior something like a person who's only ever read prose that suddenly runs across poetry and is confused and frustrated because it doesn't seem to make sense. As they try to diagram the sentences, it doesn't work out, and they become frustrated and ultimately miss the whole point. So the Jews were trying to understand Jesus' words from a literal interpretation, and obviously it was problematic. So here we are 2,000 years later. Have we done a whole lot better? Are we also not guilty of trying to diagram the sentences and trying to understand it according to our typical context of understanding things? So when Jesus comes along and says that we will never see death if we keep his word, we obviously, like the Jews, realize he's not talking about physical death. That is still very evident, still very inevitable. So we understand that Jesus must be talking about another type of life besides our physical life. And this is where we've created a bunch of structures. We have ideas about what heaven is like and what the afterlife is like and resurrection of the body, all the things which is highly speculative that we don't know the answers to. We believe it in faith, but we don't know anything for sure. So will we have an identity in the afterlife? Will we have needs and pains or sufferings or joy only? Will we know who we are? Will we recognize other people? Don't have a clue. When we are going to have a resurrected body, what's it for? Are we going to be hungry? Are we going to be doing things like we typically do? Again, you have to wait till you get there. So we have a lot of speculative ideas about what to never see death actually means in the context of Jesus' words. And ultimately, I don't think it's that important. If we pay attention, the whoever keeps my word will never see death sounds like an if-then statement. And if we don't satisfy the premise, the criteria for the first part, the second part is kind of irrelevant. And of course, in 2,000 years, we've spent a fair amount of time trying to explore what the word of Jesus is and what it means to keep it. And we've often assumed that it is a merit-based salvation, that Jesus says, whoever loves me will keep my commandments. And we believe that a morality is extremely important to a spiritual life. You can't have a spirituality without a morality. But there's a lot more to spirituality than simply morality. There's many atheists out there who are far more moral than some people of faith. So just assuming that we have to keep commandments as an obedient slave is really not the point. We human beings design computers that follow our directions, our instructions quite explicitly and perfectly. And if it doesn't, then we throw out that computer and we get another one. We just determine goodness versus badness based upon the ability to be obedient, explicit direction. And that's probably not what Jesus is talking about. If God wanted simply strict obedience, he could have created robots. He could have built computers himself. They'd do a far better job of being obedient to commandments than we as human beings are. So when we think of keeping words meaning as being obedient to instruction, to being obedient to commandments, that's not the full story. I think perhaps a more productive view of it is to recognize that the word keep refers to a choice. We keep things that are valuable to us. We keep treasures, either for sentimental or practical reasons. We get rid of things that are irrelevant or bad. So keeping Christ's word probably means that it is a treasure to us. And what does that word actually mean? What word is it? Jesus boiled down the 600 Mosaic laws to basically 2 commandments. Love God with everything you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. You don't have to be anything more than a second grader to recognize that in those 2 commandments, the common word is love. And so John's gospel emphasizes that Jesus is the Word, and Jesus is God, and God is love. That's saying an awful lot in just one word. things that are beyond our comprehension. It's kind of like trying to understand poetry without having an understanding of what the spirit, the emotion behind it is. So love is pretty much like fire. Once you've got it going, it tends to burn. It's much easier to maintain and keep it going than it is to restart it. That's why caveman carried it around as opposed to starting a new fire every time he needed one. The same is true for love. If we let it go out, if we don't foster it, we don't nurture it, we don't share it with other people, it's easy to go out and we have to return to the source, God the Father, to get it. Once we are able to share it with others, then it's amazing how much easier it is to work with and how much we discover how evident and important it is to life. In our current era, people are afraid of many things, but we're seeing examples of courageous people that are doing things out of love, and also the group community that is fostering love and support amongst themselves. Whether or not it was the Italians who were singing from their balconies or New York City who was applauding healthcare workers, there is an outpouring of goodwill and spirit which is ultimately coming from love. That is what carries us through all of this. So we don't need to worry about the afterlife so much. God will take care of that when we get there. In the meantime, we have to explore ever more deeply what love means to our lives, because that is not defining so much the afterlife, but the present life here and now, which is the only part that we actually can be concerned with.